Hello and welcome to the first ever development update for the Darker game. Today we're gonna talk about assets and, well, as you probably know, assets are a big part of a game and there are a couple of things that I think everybody should keep in mind when they make assets, especially for an indie game. But, I mean, this is true for every other kind of production, too. But I guess point number one for me would be not to overkill the quality. So if you are responsible for making assets for a game, oftentimes I find myself very tempted to make something very grand, something very detailed. But in my experience, the key to a good scene is not in the level of detail, but in the consistency of detail. So if you start making assets and you start making them beautiful, they're very detailed, the quality is top-notch, you're not going to be able to keep that up for the entire scene. Especially not if you're making a very big scene like a library that is going to require a lot of books. So I think when you start off, remember that you're going to have to keep up that quality consistently throughout your scene. And if you're a small team making the assets, you'll probably want to tone it down quite a lot. For this production, I am actually the only one making the assets, so I decided to not go too big on this. Keep it simple, but focus a lot on good normal maps, for example. That can help a simpler model look a lot better. And if your task is to make a lot of assets, I strongly recommend not to make it boring. If you're responsible for, say, making a lot of chairs for a dining room, or books for a library, or kitchen utensils for a kitchen, I think that you should invest in trying to make it more enjoyable for you to make them, or you're not gonna be able to keep up the quality, because you'll get bored and you'll just want to get things done, and you'll start cutting corners and you'll just not be as motivated to keep up that quality. So one of the things that I do is I try to find new ways to make a certain object. Say if I'm making a knife, I don't want to make the most generic knife. So maybe a lot of you just drop into Google and just type knife, then you take the first picture you see and then you follow that and you make, like, a good looking knife, but it could be more interesting for you and the player if you make it a bit more personal. And for me, I feel that definitely helps the creative process while I make my assets, because if I'm just focusing on making generic stuff that looks basically the same as it does in almost every other game, that kind of kills the motivation for me, and that's not helpful in any way. Another thing I think is very important is not to sell yourself and your abilities too short. When you're making a scene, set some challenges for yourself, like something you haven't tried before. That can also help the motivation. And I know it's going to be boring a lot of the time, but try to see it as a learning opportunity to master a skill that you clearly put a lot of effort into. And it never hurts to polish your skills. And if you're working in a team, it's very important that you keep in contact with the rest of your team. Like, usually there's a lot of people working on the scene. If we want to keep the atmosphere consistent, it's important that you speak to, like, the people doing the textures, the people doing the music, and the people that making sound effects. Because if your models don't match the tone that the music is setting, the textures, the colors, the ambient sounds and stuff, that could be a problem. And because you don't want to spend a lot of time on something and then realize that you did it wrong, or that it doesn't really fit, and worst case scenario that you can't even use it. That would totally suck. So don't make over detailed objects, keep the quality consistent, have fun with it, don't make it boring, and stay in contact with your team so that you don't mess up the atmosphere or whatever. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later, maybe in a different dev update or maybe in a tutorial, who knows.